We're good on that. So
We got our history lesson.
We're still.
no, you don't have your history lesson yet. Not yet. Good try though. Good try. Nice try. You know, but today is November 16th, and it was on this date in 1763 that English journalist and member of Parliament John Wilkes was injured in a duel. This was not the first duel that John Wilkes was in, nor was it the last. But John Wilkes was an interesting guy for a number of reasons. But he started out his career as a what we would call a populist sort of guy. And in his later life, as he became richer, he became more conservative. So draw your own conclusion there. But he was quite a rabble rouser and a critic of the crown. Had quite a following to the point of where I forgot the name of it now, but he had a demonstration, and the crown, the royal army, basically shot into it. And this is around the same time as the Boston Massacre. So apparently the Royal Army was big on it. Let's just shoot into these crowds of people and make them go away. But he was a supporter. He was a member of Parliament. He was a supporter of the colonists during that time. There's a lot of stuff named after him. Wilkes Barre University. There's a Wilkes printing press. There's a few other things, and of course he had his distant great nephew was John Wilkes Booth, the one who killed President Lincoln, who was named after him. So, Junius Booth was the father. Junius Booth named him John Wilkes Booth after the English journalist John Wilkes. But the story is that John Wilkes Booth, his preferred name was Wilkes. He wanted to be known as Wilkes. So if you wanted to get his attention, you would yell, "Hey, Wilkes," as opposed to "Hey, John." But that was that. That was on 1763. It was on this date in 1845 that Frederick Faber announced that he was leaving the Anglican Church and going to the Catholic Church. So he became a Catholic, converted to the Catholic. Why do we care? Who is Frederick Faber? Hymn writer, most notably for Faith of Our Fathers, Living Still in Spite of Dungeon, Fire and Sword. Song that I recall, I don't know where I heard it, but there's a version out there of Bing Crosby singing Faith of Our Fathers. Bing Crosby, also notorious for singing the same 10 Christmas songs over and over again. But yeah, it was in this date in 1845. It was in this date in 1922 that the Ottoman Empire ended. The Ottoman Empire ended. It lasted like 500 years, from about 1453, the fall of the Roman Empire, to the end of the Ottoman Empire. And that pretty much put Palestine, or the Levant, or the Middle East in play, so to speak. And it's from that point on that things started moving, progressing, evolving, depending on how you look at it, where you are on that particular thing. But all of the country lines in the Middle East are arbitrary. And I shouldn't say all of them. Some of them are up against lakes and things, but they're all arbitrary. And this is one of the reasons. There's a book I read several years ago called A Line in the Sand, where it just talks about that whole process, that the Western powers basically went in and said, you know what, let's make a country here. And we're going to put this guy in charge. We're going to put the Saud family in charge, and it's Arabia, so we're going to call it Saudi Arabia. So and all of the countries there are just arbitrarily done, thanks to Western influence. We'll call it influence. On this day in 1939, Al Capone was freed from jail. Yay! I guess, I don't know. He had been in Alcatraz for tax evasion, and pretty much by that time, thanks to, I think he had syphilis, was what he had. But pretty much his brain was gone, and he pretty much lived in Florida for the rest of his life. On this date in 1969, the Miley massacre was first reported. So it didn't happen. It was first reported on this date for Miley massacre. Edward Calley. Edward Calley, is that his? Calley was his.
Name was Kelly.
Calley was charged for that. It was just basically killed a bunch of people in the Vietnamese village of My Lai. My Lai is how it's usually pronounced. But it's first reported on this date in 1969. And of course, where were you on this date in 2001? Many of us, not me, were in line to see the premiere of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, kind of thing. So hard to believe it was 24 years ago. Seems like only yesterday we put our two boys, one of them back there, on the bus to camp, holding the last Harry Potter book in our hands, going, "See you guys, you guys have fun at camp." And they're like, "No." Okay, maybe that last part might not be true, but that's how I'm going to tell the story I'm going to keep telling that story so long that it's going to become baked in our memory. So yeah, that was.
We'd be interested in hearing his version.
No, you wouldn't.
We had a great time and read the book later.
All right, today we're finishing David. We're done with David today. I'm kind of sad, but the next thing will be just as good, or perhaps better. But today we're finishing David, and we're doing that by being in First Kings. So we're in 1 Kings chapter 2. And I'm calling this epilogue part 2b. Okay, could have just made it 1, 2, 3, but why do things like that? So in order to, and again, we talked a little bit about, I talked a lot in Samuel about how tight the story is and how things keep coming back. And I think this is one of the problems that with our Sunday school approach to these particular books, and that is these events are very much interrelated with other events previously. And we tend not to see that if we just go, okay, today I'm going to read chapter 2. We kind of think, oh, there's this story in chapter 2. Why does, we don't ask, we don't engage with the text. I'm reading a book, or I read a book. No, I'm reading a book by the guy who's the head of Awana. And one of the things he's talking about is faith formation in children. And he says one of the things that leads to faith formation, one of the key elements, is in scriptural engagement, kind of engagement with the text. And by engagement with the text, it's not just reading the story. It's reading the story and asking why. Why does that say that? How does that work? Kind of who is that person? And especially as you go through the Old Testament and in the New Testament, things like people matter and places matter, and what is said and who says what. This all matters. It isn't just reading the text and saying, how can I apply this to my life today? And think, oh, okay, David did this good thing. We should do good things too. That's not scriptural engagement. And so one of the things I hope, that as we're talking through these texts is that I'm modeling, just kind of looking at texts and stories and saying, okay, why does this matter? Who is this person? How do they get there? What is the author trying to accomplish with this? And again, Kings is a different book than Samuel. Samuel is more of a kind of an explanation of the United Kingdom. It's how God promised that he would provide this, and he did. He stuck with his promises despite David's best efforts to ruin everything. God stuck with him. And today, I think we see the end of this, and we see the start. Kings is a book about the United Kingdom. It's or the kingdoms. I should say it's not the United Kingdom. The kingdoms of Israel and Judah. And so, in order to get going on that, he needs to solidify the kingdom of Solomon, and the kingdom of Solomon has to deal with a couple of the things of his predecessor, his father, David. And you'll find that anytime you go into any kind of a leadership position. I spent a lot of time dealing, as principal here at the DGCS. I spent a lot of time just this past Friday. I was dealing with something, having to deal with something based on something that my predecessor had done. Okay, that was incorrect. Like, oh great, I have to fix this kind of thing, you know. Um, and so today, unlike last time, today I'm going to start with a lot of the previously. So yeah, everybody knows what the ramifications are, who everybody is, and all of that kind of stuff. So if you look in your handout, previously, David's last concubine was a woman named Abishag. Okay, and I'm calling her a concubine because to everybody's view, that's what she was. Now, if you remember, the text in 1 Kings 1 makes it very clear that David never slept with her. Okay, although no one else knew that. Okay, we believe that because that's the narrator is telling us that. If you remember, we talked about the level of certainty when the narrator tells you something in an Old Testament text, you can take that as that the narrator believes that's true. Okay. Whereas when the narrator quotes somebody, all you know is that that's what that person said. Okay. Same thing in the court of law, right? If somebody says something, all you can verify is that he or she said it. Now, whether it's true or not, I killed that person, or I did, I was driving the car, or I robbed the bank. Okay. Does that mean he robbed the bank? No. I'm going to testify that, well, this guy said he robbed the bank. Okay, well, all that proves is that he said it. It doesn't prove that he did rob the bank. So the narrator is making it clear that okay, he never slept with her, but to all intents and purposes, she was his last concubine. Okay, and we've talked about concubines throughout Samuel, and I think that's one of the interesting. Again, I think it would be a really interesting study to kind of go through and look at the women in the book of Samuel. Because I think there's just a fascinating group there. More times than not, they're rescuing David and others. Had it not been for the women in Samuel, David wouldn't have survived. But be that as it may, so his last concubine was this woman, a Shunammite, a very beautiful woman named Abishag. And previously, David's fourth son, Adonijah, led a failed attempt to be the king. Remember, he got a chariot and 50 horses, and he threw a party with all his brothers and all this kind of stuff. But previously, Nathan and Bathsheba intervened, and Solomon was made king immediately. So Adonijah was just kind of setting it up to, I think to be the king after the death of David, although it appears that everybody was kind of expecting David to die at any moment. But immediately in David's place, not after David's death. So David was the one that was going to, David was going to be was the one that could announce the next king, which again, kind of let you know that primogeniture, what is the idea that the oldest gets everything. This is one of those things in the Old Testament, especially, that's far more honored in the breach than in the observance. I mean, it's like, where is other? Once we get into Kings, you'll start seeing it a little more. But other than that, I mean, where is it you see that the oldest actually gets the bigger portion? I mean, Isaac wasn't the older son. Jacob wasn't the older son. Judah wasn't the oldest son. Okay, you keep going, and you guys are not the oldest sons. Okay, David is not the oldest son. Okay, so David, so there's, this is sort of, maybe that's the default, provided no other suggestion. But David says, okay, Solomon is going to be the king, and so Solomon is made king. And I think at this point Solomon is older. Okay, we don't know how long it is. I don't think. I don't think Solomon is an infant. I believe he's probably either young teenager or perhaps early 20s. but he certainly, within a very short period of time, he's making some fairly significant decisions that you would not expect somebody that's super young to be doing. So, let's see. Nathan and Bathsheba intervened. Solomon was made king. So David is still alive, but Solomon is the king. And prior to his death, David gives Solomon a charge which basically has 3 points. Number one, deal with Joab. Okay, deal with Joab. Number two, honor Barzillai. We know why he wants to deal with Joab. Joab killed Abner. He killed, I forget, Asmara. I forget. We'll find out when we get to it. He killed 2 commanders of Israel's army. And was troublesome in that way. Honor Barzillai. Barzillai was the leader of the family that honored David and protected David when he was on the run from Absalom. And deal with Shimei. Deal with Shimei. Shimei is that guy that was from Saul's tribe of Benjamin, who was cursing David on the way out. And then when David came back, Shimei is there going, "Hey, David, buddy, pal," kind of thing. So deal with Shimei. And I put a little asterisk there because deal with essentially means to dispatch them. Or as the kids say today, unalive them. Yes.
I have an interesting verse that you think, verse 9.
Verse 9 of which chapter?
1 Kings 2. But that oath does not make him innocent. You're a wise man. You'll know how to arrange a bloody death for him. It's not very.
Well, that's.
It's a New Living Translation. Wow. That's a
Well,
very
the
tough
NIV says regarding Shimei, but now do not consider him innocent. You are a man of wisdom. You will know what to do. Bring his gray head down to the grave in blood. Kind of a similar thing. And then of course with Joab, he says earlier in verse 6, deal with him according to your wisdom, but do not let his gray head go down to the grave in peace. So basically he's saying, make sure these two don't die natural deaths. However you figure it out, just, punish them. Now, I think it's a legitimate question to say, why is David offloading this responsibility? Why didn't David take care of it in his age? So again,
He's a man of his word.
yeah, David, David had his moments and was a great poet, but to me, David is not the greatest king of Judah. Josiah is, but that won't be on your test. Then again, maybe it will be. So deal with essentially means dispatch them or unalive them. Okay. And finally, previously among David's mighty men, remember we talked about these guys in Second Samuel. There were the 3, then there were the 30, then there were a couple of other odd ones. Was Benaiah. Benaiah, that's how I'm pronouncing it, Benaiah. And Benaiah is the guy that, among other things, okay, 23, beginning with verse 20, he says, Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, a valiant fighter from Kabzeel, performed great exploits. He struck down Moab's 2 mightiest warriors. He also went down into a pit on a snowy day and killed a lion. And he struck down a huge Egyptian. Although the Egyptian had a spear in his hand, Benaiah went against him with a club. He snatched the spear from the Egyptian's hand and killed him with his own spear. Such were the exploits of Benaiah, son of Jehoiada. He too was as famous as the 3 mighty warriors. So this is one of David's mighty men, and he basically becomes. We'll talk about what he becomes later. So he's in the mix here. Okay, so that's your previously. With that, okay, maybe I should have had a little button, skip intro kind of thing, previously. Yeah. But so we're in. So we had David's charge to Solomon, and now in 1 Kings chapter 2, beginning with verse 13, Adonijah arranges a little meeting with Bathsheba. Okay, now Bathsheba would be Adonijah's stepmother, but he has a little meeting. He says, now Adonijah, the son of Haggith, went to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. Okay, now remember, after Adonijah's revolt, or attempted revolt, he runs into he realizes that he's been bested, so he runs to the temple, he grabs a hold of the horn of the altar, okay? And he says, I'm not going to go until, or I'm not going to go until I see the king. And Solomon, he says in chapter 1, beginning, I forget, verse 51, let King Solomon swear to me today that he will not put his servant to death with the sword. Solomon replied, if he shows himself to be worthy, not a hair of his head will fall to the ground. But evil is found in him, he will die. And so with that, they brought him down from the altar, and King Solomon says, go home. Okay. So Adonijah goes, so the dust is settled on that. Solomon is the king. Adonijah goes in to Bathsheba and says, hey, I have one small request. Okay. And I think this, he says, now Adonijah, the son of Haggith, went to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. Bathsheba asked him, do you come peacefully? Now Adonijah, now Bathsheba has a reason to be concerned because her son is the king, and here this is the guy that claimed to be the king. And he's like, are you, do you have a, are we good here? Are we good? He answered, yes, peacefully. Then he added, I have something to say to you. You may say it, she replied. Now I love this. This is great. I just love this statement. He says, as you know, he said, the kingdom was mine. The kingdom was mine. All Israel looked to me as their king. But things changed. So, I was there, Adonijah points out essentially that he was the king, but things changed. Other translations say that the kingdom was turned about. You have a translation that says that, but I just like that. Things changed. I was. Everyone thought I was the king. I was the king. Okay, and so, but I'm not gonna. There's no biggie. No. So, and the kingdom has gone to my brother, for it has come to him from the Lord. Okay, and it's hard to argue with that, right? Right? He's cool, right? He understands kings. Now I have one request to make of you: do not refuse me. I like that. You see this that kind of structure in the Old Testament a lot. Can I ask you? Can I ask you to do me a favor? Don't say no. Promise you won't say no. How many of you would go? Oh, absolutely. Anyone? I just want to know in case I need to, some. Promise me you won't say no. Or can I tell you a secret? You have to promise me. This is when you're in a leadership position. This is like rule number 1. Somebody comes up to you and says, "Can I tell you a secret? But you can't tell anybody else." Never agree to that. Ever agree to that? Okay, because then I killed my brother. Okay, well you promise not to, kind of thing. But he said, "Do not refuse me. You may make it," she said. So he continued, "Please ask King Solomon. He will not refuse you to give me Abishag the Shunammite as my wife." Okay. "Very well," Bathsheba replied. "I will speak to the king for you." Okay. So Adonijah has a meeting. He points out essentially that he was the king. He only wants one small thing: to marry Abishag the Shunammite. So she goes to the king and says, "Very well, I will speak to the king for you." When Bathsheba, verse 19, when Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah, the king stood up to meet her, bowed down to her, and sat down on his throne. Now, this is exactly what happens whenever, the boys come into Debbie. They stand up, they bow down to, that kind of thing, right? Am I right? See? Okay. So, and the king, okay. So he says, verse 20, "I have one small request to make of you." She said, "Do not refuse me." Okay. The king replied, "Make it, my mother. I will not refuse you." Okay. So again, this is one small request. Now, what's wrong with this request? He just, he's just looking for love in all the wrong places and all that. He just wants to marry somebody. What's wrong with this request?
He wasn't happy with his dad in his life.
Well, okay. But Solomon reacts quite different.
Yeah.
It's David's concubine. Remember what happened why does Joab turn on Ishbosheth? Okay, because somebody accuses him of sleeping with his concubines. And Ishbosheth goes, hey, why are you sleeping with, kind of that's a possession. That's something that is seen as being part and parcel of the king. What does Absalom do when he so David leaves Jerusalem, he leaves 10 concubines, and then Absalom sets up a tent on top of the palace and then sleeps with all 10 of these concubines. Okay? So why does he do that? Because it's a message to the people that, hey, I am taking the property, the possession, the rights of whoever owned that concubine. Apparently not. It's because I said, Bathsheba, not seeing anything wrong. Notice the question marks there in the handout here. Okay? Yeah, why doesn't Bathsheba realize this? I don't know. That's a great question. It's like, Bathsheba, you're like intimately involved in this side of the universe here. You should know these things. But she doesn't.
I think maybe she knew that David had never actually slept with Adonijah.
Oh, okay.
And so she doesn't see her as a real concubine.
Okay, that could be. Which would suggest that the reason it's put in Kings that he never slept with her is to protect Bathsheba's reputation here, perhaps. But the people, all they know is this woman is sleeping with him. I mean, sleeping next to him. There's no action going on here, okay? But it's Solomon, who may or may not know what actually happened. He knows what the people think, okay? So he only wants one small thing, to marry Abishag. Bathsheba, not seeing anything wrong, goes to Solomon with one small request. Solomon sees the request for what it is, another attempt at the throne. Okay. King Solomon answered his mother, why do you request Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? You might as well request the kingdom for him. After all, he is my older brother. Yes, for him and for Abiathar the priest and Joab, son of Zeruiah. So not seeing anything wrong, Solomon sees the request for what it is, another attempt at the throne. You might as well request the kingdom for him. He's like, hey, David, or Bathsheba, Mom, seriously, Mom, come on. Seriously, don't you see what's going on here? So one thing we notice here, Solomon said he wasn't going to refuse her. He does. Okay, Solomon's like, okay, remember when I said I wasn't going to refuse you? Well, as a matter of fact, I am going to refuse you. But he sees Joab and Abiathar in this thing as well. So that's it. That's it for Solomon. That's all he needed. Okay. Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, may God deal with me, be it ever so severely, which again, that's that construction of an oath. Like, I swear this is going to happen, if Adonijah does not pay with his life for this request. Okay, so Solomon sees what it is. This is interesting. So Solomon is able to see through the request, is able to say, oh, that's what he's doing. Now, regardless of whether Solomon knows that David and Abishag had not actually slept together, okay, the people don't. And he knows what the people are going to see when this happens. Okay, so this is the guy who's wise enough to see that, who's going to turn around and then is going to later on ask for wisdom, but we're not going to get into that. But he's showing some pretty astute understanding of what's going on here. Okay. Yes.
Do you think possibly Bathsheba was smart and knew that if she made that request, Solomon would take Adonijah out?
Sure.
Bathsheba saw through it and realized that if she made that request, that Solomon would
That's certainly a possibility. Yes. In fact, I like that idea. Let me run back, revise my hand. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's a possibility.
She knows he would never go for it.
knowing the
They
request.
promised to make the request, so she did her job.
Right,
Right.
right. Okay.
I like
Sure.
that idea, because she seemed to know that that would probably be what would happen.
And sort of secondhand got rid of them that way.
No. I like that idea. Let's go with it. You know, we don't know. The text doesn't say.
Much more innocent Bathsheba does.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, there's a couple of different ways to look at why does Bathsheba do this. Because yeah, Bathsheba has every reason not to want Adonijah around. Right away, she says, "Peace."
Suspicious in the first place.
Yeah.
She had been by David's side all those years to see everything.
Yeah.
Or maybe she just wanted to go to another wedding. That's a bad excuse.
Yeah. So yeah. Why not? Yeah, that certainly is a possibility. It does fit the facts. So that and it does get rid of Adonijah. Let's find out how. So then King Solomon swore by the Lord, "May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if Adonijah does not pay with his life for this request. And now, as surely as the Lord lives." Okay, so this is like a second. Okay, be it. So it's like, "May God deal with me, be it ever so severely." That is the first oath, and now, as surely as the Lord lives, is sort of a second oath. So Solomon is like making it clear. Listen, you all would need to know. Has founded a dynasty for me as he promised. Adonijah shall be put to death today. So King Solomon gave orders to Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and he struck down Adonijah, and he died. That's it. Adonijah's out of the way. Boom. One down. Kind of thing. Adonijah's out of the way. Solomon is established. And now everybody kind of knows, whoever, because David, I think, had 8 sons. 7 or 8 sons, I forget. There's other sons in the mix there. None that we know of, because they all probably saw, you know what? It's probably best that we not cross Solomon. Okay? It's probably a good idea not to cross.
He's the oldest. He's the oldest remaining son.
Well, he could be. I don't know where he is in the mix, kind of thing. But to Abiathar. Now, I don't know whether I mentioned this or not. I couldn't remember, and the trouble is the way my handouts work is I just delete them and go back and so I can't go back to my handouts. One of the things about Abiathar, and this I thought about kind of doing a whole previously story on this. He's Eli's great grandson. Remember Eli?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 1 Samuel, Eli, and the 2 sons, and the curse on his sons. Pardon me?
I thought all their line died. I didn't know those were.
No, that wasn't the curse. The curse was that none of them would reach old age. Okay, which I thought was kind of really interesting curse, and that he would be removed that his family would be removed. Now, Abiathar is the last of Eli's relatives that are still in the priesthood. And part of the curse, or part of the judgment on Eli, was that his family was going to be removed from the priesthood. To Abiathar the priest, the king said, "Go back to your fields in Anathoth. You deserve to die, but I will not put you to death now, because you carried the ark of the sovereign Lord before my father David and shared all my father's hardships," which he did. Abiathar was there for a lot for David.
Well, he still left it open in the future.
Well, yeah. So Solomon removed Abiathar from the priesthood of the Lord, fulfilling the word the Lord had spoken at Shiloh about the house of Eli. Okay, next. Okay, again, we didn't, this is another thing to check off the list before Solomon is ready to go.
When does old age start?
Yeah, back then. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Moses was 80 before he started. So if I, yeah. Like my dad, I would always accuse my dad of being old or suggest or something like that. And his reply was always the same: "I'll let you know when I get there," kind of thing. I'll let you know. What's it feel like to be old, Dad? I don't know. I'll let you know when I get there, kind of thing. So when I get there, Ed, I'll let you know. So, go back to your fields. You deserve to die, but I won't. So Solomon removed Abiathar, etc., etc. Okay, verse 28. When the news reached Joab, who had conspired with Adonijah, though not with Absalom. Remember, he killed Absalom. Okay. So he killed Abner, he killed Amasa, he killed, literally with and Absalom. He fled to the tent of the Lord and took hold of the horns of the altar. Does this sound familiar? So he goes into the tabernacle, he sees the altar, grabs the horns and sits there. Who else did this? Adonijah did. Remember? And it seemed to work for Adonijah. But, well, yeah, but I'm just, it is. It's a kind of a sanctuary idea. So when the news reached Joab, who had conspired, he goes in. King Solomon was told that Joab had fled to the tent of the Lord and was beside the altar. Then Solomon ordered Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, go strike him down. Now this is Benaiah, the guy who went down into a snowy fit to kill a lion, killed several of others. Let me see. Might as well request orders of death. Moves Abiathar. Okay, we later learn that Abiathar is replaced by Zadok the priest. Joab, realizing his days are numbered, flees to the tabernacle like Adonijah. So Solomon sends Benaiah to kill him, but Joab refuses to leave. And then they put in like sanctuary. Does he think he's in a sanctuary here? So Benaiah entered the tent of the Lord and said to Joab, "The king says, 'Come out.' But he answered, 'No, I will die here.' So Benaiah reported to the king, 'This is how Joab answered me.'" Joab won't come out. So Solomon says, "Then the king commanded Benaiah, 'Do as he says, strike him down and bury him.'" Go in there and kill him. So much for the sanctuary idea. Okay, whether it was a sanctuary or not, he's got he knows that Joab was in on this Adonijah thing. He knows that Joab is trouble. He's got the charge from his father. Just go in there and kill him. So he does. So Benaiah, a guy, one of David's mighty men, okay, strike him down and bury him, and so clear me and my whole family of the guilt of the innocent blood that Joab shed. The Lord will repay him for the blood he shed, because without my father David knowing it, he attacked 2 men and killed them with the sword. Both of them, Abner, son of Ner, commander of Israel's army, and Amasa, son of Jether, commander of Judah's army, were better men and more upright than he. Okay, so Solomon has done his homework. It's like, may the guilt of their blood rest on the head of Joab and his descendants forever, but on David and his descendants, meaning Solomon, his house and his throne, may there be the Lord's peace forever. So Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, went up and struck down Joab and killed him, and he was buried at his home in the country. The king put Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, over the army in Joab's position and replaced Abiathar with Zadok the priest. Okay, all right.
Can you remind me, was Joab David's uncle?
Cousin, nephew.
Nephew? Joab was David's nephew.
Right, David's sister's son. As was Asahel and Ahithophel. There were 3 of them. Asahel, Ahithophel, and Joab. They had 3 brothers. Zeruiah was the mother, David's sister. So this would be Solomon's cousin. Right? That's how that works. Uncle, cousin. Yeah. Solomon's cousin. Now, again, we're seeing something in Solomon that we never saw in David, and that is that David could never deal with his own family. Okay, he just couldn't or wouldn't. I don't know. But Solomon, cousin, So then, okay, verse 36. So Benaiah, so then turn over and we'll talk about Shimei. Solomon has one more person to deal with, Shimei. Okay. So, I don't know, the way it sounds is like, Solomon has a checklist. Okay, who's left? Shimei. Go get Shimei. Bring him in here. Okay. So, where am I? Then the king sent for Shimei and said to him, "Build yourself a house in Jerusalem and live there, but do not go anywhere else. The day you leave and cross the Kidron Valley, you can be sure you will die. Your blood will be on your head." Okay. So Solomon tells Shimei, you can live in Jerusalem, but never, ever leave. So I don't know, this isn't house arrest, this is more like city arrest. Don't leave, you've seen the movies where, okay, don't leave town, or if you're in a foreign country, they take your passport, so you can never leave the country, kind of thing. Don't leave town. He says, then Shimei answered the king, what you say is good, your servant will do as my lord the king has said. And Shimei stayed in Jerusalem for a long time. All right, well, so great. Solomon's got Shimei right where he wants him. He's got his eye on him. And he says, but 3 years later, 2 of Shimei's slaves ran off to Achish, son of Maacah, king of Gath, who we've heard him before. He was one of the guys that David was hanging with when David was on the run. But so two of Shimei's slaves ran off to Achish, son of Maacah, king of Gath, and Shimei was told, your slaves are in Gath. At this, he saddled his donkey and went to Achish at Gath in search of his slaves. So Shimei went away and brought the slaves back from Gath. Okay, so he took off. So at this time, this is a really good reason. Okay, in this context, this is a really good reason to leave. Oh, this is my property. I gotta go get my property. When Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and had returned, the king summoned Shimei and said to him, did I not make you swear by the Lord and warn you on the day you leave to go anywhere else, you can be sure you will die? At that time you said to me, what you say is good, I will obey. Why then did you not keep your oath to the Lord and obey the command I gave you? Now I don't know what I don't know what David was expecting here. What Solomon was expecting here. I've had conversations with students in my office where something stupid was done. So that's kind of the best I can say that here. They frown on it. You're saying that was a stupid thing to do. They frown on that kind of. But and I'll say, walk me through what you were thinking when you did that. Just kind of explain to me what your thought process was. And the usual response is something along the line of, I don't know. All right, well, therein lies the problem. Of course, you ever heard the joke, one boy, one brain, 2 boys, half brain, 3 boys, no brain, kind of thing, right? And when you go beyond that, it just goes exponentially negative. I mean, it just, kind of thing. But so why then did you not keep your oath to the Lord and obey the command I gave you? Now, it could be that Shimei had been living in peace for 3 years. He figured he had done his time. I mean, you'd think that you'd kind of know that, hey, there's just a thing about my. Did Shimei ever think about this? I mean, I know Shimei kind of is sort of an oily character to begin with. I mean, he was the guy that was cursing David when he was out. He was sucking up to David when he's coming back in. Maybe he just figured he could talk his way. Figured he talked his way back into David's good graces. He's going to talk his way back into Solomon's good graces. Now, I did it before. I did it with your dad. I can do it with you. But apparently, we don't know what Shimei's response is. It could be that Solomon has no interest in what his answer is, because Solomon has a job to do. Solomon was given a charge. Make sure this guy doesn't die a natural death. Here's my opportunity, And so he says, the king also said to Shimei, you know in your heart all the wrong you did to my father David. Now the Lord will repay you for your wrongdoing. But King Solomon will be blessed, and David's throne will remain secure before the Lord forever. Then the king gave the order to who? Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck Shimei down, and he died. And then finally we have the end of chapter 2. the end of chapter 2, the last phrase here, the end of chapter 2, which is the end of the story of David. That is, the kingdom was now established in Solomon's hands. So after 3 years, Shimei leaves Jerusalem to chase escaping slaves.
Why
Sol-
didn't he just send somebody else?
Pardon me?
Why didn't he just send somebody else?
I don't know. I just think he just figured, okay, I've done my time, and I can. He's certainly not serious about this. He certainly isn't going to hold me to this. Here or here, over here. He's not going to hold me to this. And again, I talk myself back into David's good graces. I can talk myself back into Solomon's. To me, that's the best explanation of what he was thinking at that time. Okay. But again, there's no indication here that Solomon even let him talk. He didn't need to, so, because this was just a statement of fact. Did you cross the Kidron Valley? Yes. That's it. Motivation doesn't matter. It's you. I said, if you do this, this will happen. Did you do that? Yes. There you go. End of story. And so after 3 years, Shimei leaves Jerusalem to chase escaping slaves. Solomon is told. He summoned Shimei, and then Solomon comes down on Shimei. Didn't we agree? Why did you leave? Oh, by the way, remember what you did to David. Shimei is probably thinking, I don't know what he was thinking when he was going to see Solomon that day. Hey, the king wants to see you. He's probably practicing his speech, probably thinking, okay, I'm going to say this. And then just like I said to David, I talked my way into this, I talked my way into that kind of thing. I'm going to get out of this. It's not going to be a problem. Piece of cake. Okay. But then he comes in there and like, oh, Solomon's not as talkative as David was. Solomon is not as forgiving as David was. Okay. Solomon is not as unwilling to pull the trigger, so to speak, as David was. Okay. So once again, Benaiah is given the job and he dispatches Shimei. I don't know. I just got a kick out of using the word dispatch as a euphemism for killing people. And finally, pardon me? Yeah, neutralizing. Finally, the kingdom was established in Solomon's hands. So and in the world of kings and kingdoms, having the kingdom, succession is a huge deal. I mean, Shakespeare wrote about 8 plays that basically deal with nothing but succession. Who's going to be the king after me? And you think about all of the fun stories of Henry VIII, king. What was his thing? Succession. He wanted a male heir. He went through 6 wives to end up with a male heir. 6 wives. He had 1 son who lasted 5 years, 6 years as king. Edward. I don't remember what number he is. Edward the 5th, 4th, something like that. But succession is a big thing. So now we can start the story of Kings. We're not going to start the story of Kings, but now we can start the story of Kings and see how the Lord preserved his country and how the story of Kings is how do the kings of Israel match up against the law? Because again, at the end of every king's story, or just about every king's story, you have and so did that which was right in the Lord's eyes, or did evil in the eyes of the Lord, kind of thing. It talks about what did they do with the high places and all of that. That's kind of going through Kings. So, all right, it's a sad moment. I'm done with David. I won't talk about David again. Well, maybe. I keep reminding myself of that. Any questions? I just want to point out for the record that we are done early today. Well, earlier than I have been done. Yeah. So you can't say I'd never done it. Any questions about David? So next week we'll be doing a brief excursus into talking about dispensationalism. What is it? Why does it matter? What are the ramifications of it? Where did we get it from? All that. I don't know how long that's going to last.
Why didn't you name one of your sons David?
Well, if we had a 3rd son.
No, I mean 2.
Because to me, David isn't a king. It's the name I really wanted to. just the question is, why didn't I name one of them Josiah? Or Jonathan. Yes, Jonathan too. But, or Benaiah, really. That, I mean, really, if we'd had a third son, we would have named him Benaiah, right there, kind of thing. Any questions about the? Any questions about the? No, I've had to substitute in a couple of classes recently. Just somebody's father had a heart attack, and I've got 5 minutes notice, and okay, I guess I'm going to give the test in your class today. But when I've done that, I've say, okay, you guys, here's your chance. You ask the principal anything you want, and then I have to rule out. Okay, you cannot ask me how old I am, and you cannot ask me how much money I make. Not because those aren't good questions, but because you've already asked them. Because this kid will say, how old are you? And then this one over here will say, well, when were you born? Okay, I just tell them I'm 105. Just deal with it, kind of thing. But all right, well, thank you very much, and we'll see you guys next. Oh, and there won't be Sunday school 2 weeks from today. 2 weeks, because that's Thanksgiving week. Just so everybody's aware. Okay.
Next week we will.
Yes, next week we will. So, all right, thank you very much. Oh, sure.
Folder for next week or call.
This will be uploaded to the courses, so you can actually.
I don't have access to them, I don't know. Thank you.
Well, I think it's,
I know that that's,
for the
I
minutes.
don't know how they were back then.
Yeah, but.
Here, you can have this one. That's the one that has the answers on it. So.
Like they were gonna do that a year ago.